certainly will. I just want to say I'm very grateful to be here. I'm disabled, so I'm not able to stand or walk across the stage. So I'm coming to you from Fountain View. It's a retirement center in West Palm Beach, and it's very dear to me. My used to be my father's property, and my sister Nita, who is participating today, watching, ran this place. And it was at that point in my life when my father encouraged me to resign because of my addictions and mental health. And that was about the time when I started the L Foundation. Um, it's been 27 years of struggle for me to walk through my mental health and addictions. Hold on, we're not ready. Oh dear. Excuse me. We have a problem. I've changed the slides, the or the order and the orientation. So uh, just don't. Oh, I'm at a loss. Can we just hold this slide where we're at? Right. No. I'm not doing this. Okay. What is precision genomic addiction medicine? It's a treatment personalized for your specific genome. Addiction is characterized by dysregulated dopamine transmission, as are many other mental health disorders. This is known as reward deficiency syndrome, or RDS. Treating the underlying neurogenetic challenges which predate addiction can greatly enhance recovery success. RDS solutions include a simple gene screen or GARS test to determine your individual genetic profile or your genome. Neurological analysis can identify your specific neurological challenges and the proper treatment response. And this is a simple phase 2 treatment which can be outsourced and implemented through telehealth. Okay, I am ready for another slide, and my order has changed a little bit. This is about the L Foundation 100 research case series, which began 2 years ago and was concluded this year and published. All right, next slide. All right, case study 101. The proband appeared to be treatment resistant to substance use disorder treatment. And basically, this was because she had so many mental health disorders and an underlying neurogenetic challenge in both her dopamine and serotonin neurotransmitters. Case study 102 compared biological sisters. One was functioning properly, the other was mental health disorder challenged. Study 103 reviewed 3 successive generations, mother, daughter, and granddaughter. Case study 104 is an ongoing longitudinal study with 2 grandsons. We've done their gene analysis and are trying to prevent manifestation of addictions and mental health disorders. All right, next slide, please. How does genetic variance for reward deficiency syndrome affect family members individually and collectively? Well, for that, we'll have to look at the lifespan of how RDS manifests from early age to elder age. Next slide, please. All right, we're gonna pause on this one. Look at early childhood. Neurological development delay, attention deficit disorder, attention hyperactivity disorders, and those on the autism Asperger spectrum. These are early manifestations of reward deficiency syndrome. Moving on to adolescence. Those with RDS tend to develop social or emotional developmental delay, and it's the beginning of personality disorders and some impulse control disorders. By the time addiction manifests in adolescence or early adulthood, the low dopamine availability is already progressing and showing up as substance use disorder or other non-behavioral addictions. So it's important to identify RDS early on. This can go on through life, and lots of times people with addictions will end up with Parkinson's. This is about low dopamine availability. Okay, I'm winging it because, next slide, please. 60 years of research has gone into creating this theory of RDS phenotypes and endotypes. And at this point, it is believed that reward deficiency syndrome is the phenotype, the underlying causal influence, and that mental health disorders such as addiction or any of those DSM diagnoses are endotypes. You might think of them as symptoms. Okay, so on the addictive side, you've got all of your substance use disorders and you've got your non-substance disorders like eating disorders, gambling, sexual addictions. So a client in substance use disorder treatment with mental health comorbidity may have several expressions of this. It may be a complexity of challenge because they don't just have the substance use disorder that they're trying to halt. Other things are popping up like bipolar, ADHD, PTSD. For these clients, more is needed. This is the population that typically doesn't do that well in substance use disorder treatment. They're your chronic relapsers because more is going on in their brain. Whereas substance use disorder treatment addresses psychological behaviors and thoughts, reward deficiency syndrome treatment addresses neurological challenges that are going on underneath the surface. And when we address those underlying problems, recovery success can be greatly increased. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. From the L Foundation 100 series, we gleaned some information. The first research point is reward deficiency syndrome solution and or reward dysregulation syndrome solution system is a frontline modality. Okay, this should be beginning to be addressed by primary care physicians. And the treatment solution is geared towards inducing dopamine homeostasis. And for that, we need the genetic screening. We need to know what these mutations are and how they affect your neurotransmission. For case study 101, I'm going to repeat that based on this neurological analysis, she had an increased dopamine metabolism. She already had low dopamine availability, a reduced number of neuroreceptor sites for dopamine, and the engine of her brain was running through dopamine at a faster rate. She also had problems in her serotonin channel. So by knowing these chemical imbalances initially, nutraceutical amino acid therapies and pharmaceutical therapies were geared specifically for her genome. This is brain science at its best. Okay, the second research point, reward deficiency syndrome is underlying neurological challenge, which predates substance use disorders. Practitioners must address underlying neurogenetic and epigenetic causal influences of mental health disorders in order to assist in facilitating lasting recovery. The third point, genetic addiction risk severity or GARS testing. It's an effective resource in helping to prevent future addictive behavioral manifestations and help stop the generational cycle of substance use disorders. Okay, next slide, please. We are developing a 200 series, which we're hoping to engage practitioner and researcher collaborations in the market. We want to move this into the treatment industry. It's not enough just to know what works. We want to be able to give this to the people. The L Foundation is already doing gene screens right now, and the neurological analysis of those gene screens. But RDS treatment plans and RDS therapies are also available. At this point, we want to test them in the market. So next slide, please. The hypothesis of these studies is that addressing neurogenetic and epigenetic causal influences facilitate long-term recovery and increase well-being. We certainly know this is true in the L Foundation 100 case series. Next slide. Okay. We have a business plan of how to actually restructure the substance use disorder industry and make this therapy available. We want to build upon the 12-step model. Ever since Hazel first let somebody sleep it off on her couch, and the Hazelton Foundation created substance use disorder treatment for the entire world, science has been giving us new discoveries. Cognitive behavioral therapies in the 12-step modality are standard. But at this point, we would like to add or contribute the benefits from neurological testing by now analyzing the genes that predate addiction and those epigenetic insults, those changes in the brain which happen after substance use disorder. We think that if you address these issues, you will have a missing piece of the puzzle and help facilitate lasting change. All of this science has created an entire new field called psychiatric genomics, where your psychiatrist will do your genetic screening, and based upon that, know exactly the correct pharmaceuticals that will work for your brain. They gauge by the mechanism of action of whether you need more dopamine or less dopamine. And I hope I'm not losing you. This is out of order for me. Let's go on to the next slide. All right, this is the system that Dr. Kenneth Bloom and his associates, he has an international team of about 100 scientists that he works with. And this is the product of 60 years of research, but we're not going to go into this too much. This will be presented later if you're interested in doing RDS certification perhaps next year. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, so what is the science? We have psychiatric genomics, which is going to head the field of mental health disorder and behavioral health for addiction patients. The added piece of the puzzle is neurogenetic and epigenetic analysis. From that point, you develop a new treatment plan based specifically on addressing reward deficiency syndrome. Okay, this is a phase 2 treatment to be initiated after inpatient substance use disorder treatment. The two complement each other and hopefully will go hand in hand. Next slide, please. All right. They're changing the word from reward deficiency syndrome to reward dysregulation syndrome. And there's a reason for that. Low dopamine is not always the case. For some individuals, they have too much dopamine. And this shows up in adolescents and those with schizophrenia. So Dr. Bloom has introduced a paradigm for this new standard of care. And that's what hyper and hypodopamine dysfunction means. You've got too much dopamine or too little. Genetic testing is a must. It's where we start. It's the foundation that this treatment plan is built upon. And this facilitates or leads into a brain health check. It's pretty logical to treat the brain of a mental health patient, because addressing just psychology is not enough. You've got to look into the physiological aspects. And the physiological are greatly determined by what your genes are. DNA is a genetic blueprint for the manufacture of your cells. Okay, so rather than treating the symptoms, this is looking at the root causes. The goal of reward deficiency syndrome treatments is to induce dopamine homeostasis. And what that means is you want balance in your dopaminergic systems. The pro-dopamine regulation is a fancy word for the brain reward treatment that you can purchase on Amazon. It's manufactured at this point by Victory Nutrition International. Dr. Blum has the patent for that. I use it myself, and so does my family. It's, I believe, 26 of the 29 amino acids that every individual needs for proper brain function. Okay, precision behavioral management is offered as a certification course for therapists and people working in this industry. It's kind of a neuropsychology, so it's offered by United Scientists. All right, next slide, please. Okay. So it's not enough to know theoretically and to have the research world know that these advances work and they're absolutely necessary. It tends to take 100 years for cutting edge research science to trickle down to the point where it's common knowledge. So I would like to speed that up because I want my children to have access to these resources. So how do we integrate the science now? How do we put it into practice? How do we make it so that the person going to the doctor can get treatment for what's really wrong with them? All right, this is known as the reward deficiency syndrome paradigm shift. We support the science, we believe the science, we trust the science. So what that would take for treatment centers and for therapists to create and continue to expand the RDS resource network to hook up with other people working in this field. And thank goodness telehealth makes all of that possible. This system can be delivered through telehealth as a part of your, or on location as a part of your ongoing continuing care. All right, let me go down the list. Let's talk about the business model, which can be outsourced. If you would like to know more about that, would you please contact me at lresearch.com. All right, next slide, please. These are some of the solutions that I've been working on. When Case Study 101 began after her substance use disorder treatment and her therapy, her psychology therapy, her psychiatry therapy, when the reward deficiency treatment plan was created based on her genome, a therapy was created to explain this to her, to give her another frame to look at her mental health issues through. So, and this has been expanded on to families as well. Next slide, please. To summarize what I've been trying to say, the GARS test is imperative. It informs the creation of genomic reward deficiency syndrome treatment plans and the personalized therapy. And it's available right now. The L Foundation is gearing up for the 2000 series, and we invite people to call and to be screened. And we also want to shout out to Denny Carice. We would love to have some joint practitioner, researcher collaborations. Next slide, please. This is the contact information for L Research, 336-608-0881. Already we are doing GARS testing for people that want to have it. And based upon their GARS results, doing a neurological analysis of what their brain chemistry is like. Next slide, please. I am so proud to be associated with these people. 10 years ago, John Giordano, who's been a lifelong mentor, suggested that I research Kenneth Blum. And I've been doing that for 10 years. John will be doing the presentation following me, and he's in Southern Florida and is branching out to bring resources to the public, which are new and novel. I trust this man with my life. Okay, but this team that has been so gracious to mentor me and to supervise my work. Let's look at Dr. Kenneth Blum. His resume is about 60 pages long. His scientific contributions are just over the top. He brings us the GARS testing and all of the reward deficiency syndrome solutions, such as the amino acid brain reward. We're very grateful for him. He's most recently developed a test measurement called the RDSQ, which a patient or client can do this simple psychological test, and it will let us know whether we need to spend the money for the genetic screening. Eric Braverman, he's a brain doctor in New York, and he advocates the brain health checkup. Dr. Frank Lane is a psychiatrist in Dallas. I think he's the best psychiatrist I have ever met, and he is knowledgeable about reward deficiency syndrome. And Harry Henshaw does a free 7 a.m. everyday Zoom meeting to help people in recovery change their thoughts. He has been fundamental in helping treatment centers in Southern Florida, and he's bringing it to the public through telehealth. So you can look him up with enhancedhealing.com. And back around to myself, I founded the L Foundation in 1995 and unincorporated it in 2003. I didn't want to continue to create or put energy into creating a nonprofit. But we never dropped our cause, never stopped working. We just became private. If we're not selling anything, there's no reason to do government filings if no money is changing hands. However, at this point, we're going forward. It will be a for-profit company called the L Foundation Research Institute, where we try to deliver these resources to the public. And you can find out more about that through lresearch.com. Next slide, please. I want to thank you for participating. If you have any questions, let me know.